And if you could go back in time and you could either vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, who would you vote for?
Right now,
Yeah,
absolutely Donald Trump for sure.
for sure, for sure. So why is that?
Well, there are many reasons. Where would you like me to start? Do you prefer economy or social issues, or what do you think?
Let's talk about economic policy. Like, what economic policy of Trump's do you like?
Well, I mean, I like his general sentiment towards business, first of all, right? Like, and so I think a big thing that people miss up here is just the regulatory state. It's not as much legislative as it is, I think, a regulatory issue. And so getting rid of a lot of that red tape and just understanding from the private sector that there aren't going to be new regulations that are going to detrimentally or at least really affect the bottom line as badly, I think that's positive for the economy.
Okay. So which specific red tape would you like to get rid of?
Well, it's not that I would like to get rid of. I think that a lot of it is already gotten rid of through executive action towards the beginning of the presidency. But aside from that, like I said, I think the main thing, and I think you can see that through a lot of companies and earnings in the stock market. Which I'm not saying that that's indicative that the little guy's doing well. I'm just trying to exemplify that the bottom line of those companies, they are not really worried about new investments. They're not really worried about taking on higher risk because they know that the regulatory state isn't going to get worse under Donald Trump for them.
Okay. So like what specific red tape or regulations did he get rid of at the beginning of his administration?
I'd have to look it up specifically, but I mean, I know for a fact that he did a lot for oil and gas. I know that he like made a statement that he wasn't going to put burdensome regulations on the crypto market. I know that he really, it's kind of, I understand that you're looking for specifics, which I just don't have in front of me, but everybody knows that he is more business friendly and the party is just in general when it comes to the regulatory state. So, there are hundreds of regulations that he's cut. So,
Yeah, but although it might be all like better for the business, right, that specifically is going to profit off of it, it's not better for the country. The reason why we impose a lot of these regulations is because it leads to a greater level of social welfare, social benefit, if we do put these regulations in place, because it changes the level of distribution and production that these businesses engage in. Because if they engage in the level of distribution and production that's going to be just profit maximizing for them, that's not profit maximizing for society. Think about it this way: a business would profit off of putting their waste into a river that's right next to them. Really cheap to go do that. They don't have to spend as much. But if that is then put into the water and people use that water that are living in the community around it, their health will be harmed. So we'll have greater costs in society overall if we do not have the regulation that put in place that limited the level of distribution and production that they engaged in to a level in which wouldn't lead to that level of waste being put into the river. Does it make sense?
makes total sense. I have a couple thoughts about that. I think one, I think it's a little bit short-sighted, right? Because, and I think that that's just probably a philosophical economic difference that you and I would have. Because I would say that, sure, maybe in the short term, it doesn't directly affect the people. Over the long term, it absolutely would. And the reason why is because that investment will inevitably, or that extra money will inevitably go back into the economy and could potentially lead to new jobs and to lower prices for consumers. So I actually push back there. And then, secondly, I think that the example, I understand what you're trying to say, but I think it was pretty extreme. Reason why is I think that that is an environmental hazard that, there's pending litigation if that ever happens. And I don't even mean pending. There have been lawsuits in the past with absolutely massive settlements because of harming people intentionally or knowingly, right? And so that's a tort. That's not something that you can just get away with, even if, somebody cuts a regulation that makes it a little bit easier to have a business.
Yeah, so you said that there would be like lower prices for consumers. And sure, although there could be lower prices for consumers if certain regulations aren't in place to ensure that they have safety regulations on environmental protections, well, then, I mean, their health is going to be harmed to a greater extent, so the lower prices aren't going to matter. Secondly, we can point to the conditions, like, and we can give
I
specific
don't
examples for
understand.
this.
Can you sort of repeat the first point just because I'm not sure I understood the connection.
Yeah, the lower prices for consumers are not going to be justified given the fact that it's going to lead to a greater level of harm in society towards the average consumer, right?
So what
If
harm?
there's not, yeah. So like I was mentioning specifically in terms of pollution, right? Pollution, people. Did you know that?
I mean, I think that, I
Medical
mean,
bills
sure.
are due
Yes,
to
yes,
pollution.
sure,
You know that,
sure,
right? So if
sure.
there isn't a specific law that limits a company from engaging in a behavior that then harms the rest of society, are they going to stop engaging in that behavior that harms the rest of society if it's profit maximizing for them? No. They're going to do the profit maximizing condition. So although it's profit maximizing for them, it's not
Well,
profit
I
maximizing for
understand.
the entirety of our society.
I understand what you're saying, but I also, again, I just think that that argument is kind of short-sighted. Why? Because I
It's
think
not though.
that yeah, but I think it is because you're just ignoring a lot of the law. And what I said is that he can change the regulatory state, but not the legislative state. That would actually require Congress, right? And Congress never gets anything done, right? So you can't just go and harm people and expect there to be absolutely no repercussions. And that's why we have checks and balances and the judiciary, to go take up these cases and figure out, is this actually legal? And that's why there's so much pending litigation about a lot of this red tape cutting, because if it isn't legal, I'm never here to claim that Trump is a perfect person. And I don't think that you would claim that Biden was or Obama was either, because a lot of the courts, or a lot of times courts struck down what they were trying to do as well. But that's the entire reason that we have them, not just because somebody's trying to be tyrannical, but because somebody's trying to do what they said that they were going to do. And then we have those established checks and balances to try to make sure that if it goes too far, it can't be done.
Yeah, so that's regulation that you're referencing. If there is no regulation, then the law can't provide any repercussions. So if you
What I'm
wanted to
saying is
reduce
that
the regulate
the law beats regulations, right? And so if there is
what
a
the
lack
law,
of
that is a
regulation, but
regulation. The law being a
what
certain
is?
way, that is a regulation.
No, you are not right. There are
What is a
laws and there are
regulation?
regulations. A regulation is something that is instituted by an agency, right? And those regulations, why do you think that all these rules change every 4 years, right? It's because somebody gets appointed to head of an agency, and then they have authority to go and promulgate new regulations, and they can also repeal all of those regulations that were, by the past president, pretty easily, right? And that's why the confirmation hearings are so, important, and why it's always like 51-50, because the other side doesn't want these new regulation heads, or these new regulatory heads, because of these agencies, because they're not going to get any of the they want, right? We live in a regulatory state, not a legislative one. But what I'm saying is that we do have laws on the books, anything, and those are separate from regulations. But laws are more on the hierarchical system of, what beats what. Laws beat regulations in terms of authority, and then the judiciary is there to determine whether the lack of a regulation, or repealing a regulation, or instituting a new regulation complies with existing laws, not the other way around. That's why we have the judiciary and the legislative and the executive. All of these regulations are under the executive branch, not under the legislative or the judicial. So
Okay. So let's just go through this because you said a regulation would be instituted by an agency. It could be a government agency that institutes it.
it would
So
be. I
let's just
mean, it would
clarify.
be.
What's a law?
A law is something that's passed by Congress.
Just something passed by Congress? That's it?
Well, it would be a legislative act passed by, yeah, that would be a law. And then also state governments as well, right? Like, so there are laws in Massachusetts and New Jersey and Florida and whatever. So there are
You're,
state
you're,
laws, there
you're
are
not really
federal laws.
getting. You're not really. You kind of told me what it, not. You didn't really define it for me. Like what I'm asking for in terms of a law is what is a law? It's going to be like a regulation on human behavior
No,
enforced
nope,
by a
nope,
certain
nope. You're
agency.
conflating. You're unnecessarily conflating, right? And like I feel like you could be arguing with me about other things, but this is just the definition, right? A
Sure, the way
regulation
that
is
the way that we
something.
enforce a regulation is through the law, right?
We enforce regulation actually probably through fines, and
That's
other
through the law,
mechanisms.
right? The law being a certain way,
No,
meaning
no,
that you
not
get fined.
necessarily.
What? Wait, what do you mean? If there's a fine, that's in the law, right? That's a punishment of the law.
No, you are just still not understanding. You use the law to be able to enforce a regulation. So it would be legal. It complies with the laws. But a regulation can be something that is governed by another piece of law that is not at all related necessarily to that regulation. I don't really understand why you look so perplexed,
How,
right?
how,
Like
how do you I guess how do you enforce a regulation? Is it the use of the law?
The regulation is self-enforcing, and that agency would enforce it. If the SEC has a
Self-enforcing.
regulation,
What do you mean by by writing it down? That
I
doesn't
was just
enforce the
about to
law.
explain it. Just stop interrupting, and I can teach you something. So basically,
Okay.
if an agency has a regulation, like say the EPA or the SEC or something like that, right? They would be able to go after a company that was not compliant. And what are they not compliant on? They're not compliant based on the regulation that they wrote, not the law. These are two different things.
The regulation is written in the law, right?
No.
Okay. I'm confused what your point is then, because if it's not written in the law, how do they enforce it?
Ay, ay, ay. This is now I know how you feel most of the time when you're debating these people, because I do tune in sometimes, and sometimes I'm just like my head spins with like, people that are just not understanding. But you're a smart dude, right? Like this is not that difficult. Just think of it this way: when any president comes in, they put in new heads of agencies. Those heads of agencies are able to implement regulations, and yeah, those are legal based on the law and interpretations of those laws.
Hmm.
But what I no no you're nodding, but that doesn't mean that they're not two different things. You can repeal that regulation and put in place a whole separate regulation where that is opposite to what the other regulation was, right? And the law doesn't change. And you don't need any legislative approval or any approval from anybody unless they are sued, and then that's litigated in the courts. Does that make sense?
In the court of law. So again, I understand the distinction between the terms that you're trying to provide, but there is some sort of interrelation between regulation and the law,
Well,
right?
of course. But what I'm saying
Okay,
is
sure,
that
sure,
regulations change very easily and the law doesn't.
sure. I think that the dispute that we were having there is very. It's not necessary for us to continue to go over. At
Well,
least
I mean,
the at
yeah.
least the point that we're making is that if there is no regulation, then there wouldn't be any repercussions. The way that you put repercussions for a business in terms of the particular type of production and distribution that they engage in is by putting in place a regulation. So again, we would just have to ask specifically, like, what regulations would you be in support of existing versus not existing? Because you wouldn't just say because a regulation exists, you should get rid of it, right?
No, I would not say that, but I would say that they need to be scrutinized. And I also think that, and this is true of the 2016 Trump era, I think they're doing a lot better job of it now. But just leaving regulations that are so unnecessary in place, right? Like so antiquated, and like we can talk about like originalism and whatever about the actual Constitution, but obviously, based on my last point, the regulations are something that are fluid and like they come and go, and so we shouldn't keep regulations that could potentially be suppressing business and like suppressing like economic activity just merely because they were a regulation at some point in the past.
You need to be specific with which regulations you want to get rid of. If you don't know
Well,
the
which
regulations,
ones are you mad that he got rid of? That's the same. I mean, because I'm
well,
not mad
I
that he got
asked you
rid of
which
any.
ones do you support him getting rid of. How about you
Well,
start with
again,
that?
I don't have a list, but that's kind of my point. I can't think of any that I've heard about that I'm not supportive of him getting rid of. Does that make sense? Because like I have an issue with the regulatory state as a whole.
Okay. Well, then you should be able to mention at least a specific regulation you'd want to get rid of. It sounds
Well,
like
I
they were
already
really
did. Like
generalized in
I
terms
already
of the
said,
different.
like I think that any constraints off like the oil and gas industry, which I know that he took off, but now I can't cite it to you because I'm standing in my kitchen and I'm not looking, at my computer or whatever. I'm absolutely in support of that. Any, yeah, basically I can't think of any that I've been upset that I've heard about. Right.
Okay. So, in terms of different regulatory aspects, do you support the decreasing in the funding for the World Health Organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they piled a bunch of garbage during COVID, and everybody knows that.
Do you support decreasing funding for cancer research?
No, of course not. And I'm sure that they did that, but I would love to know. And like that, like these things are more nuanced than I think just like the headline, right? Like I think that we should know where, like to what organization is that going? What kind of cancer research are they doing? Is it actually being used effectively? Like I'm absolutely in favor of scrutinizing those things and figuring out is it actually effective. But no, I don't want to just get rid of cancer research,
Why don't
right?
we do
And I
that with the
highly doubt that
military?
we have.
Why don't we do
What
that with
about
the
what?
military? The military,
With
where we can't even pass audits with the military. There's a lot of waste spending in the military, but for some reason, there's more waste spending in cancer research.
I didn't say that. at
Well, I
all.
mean, then why are we specifically looking at that to find waste and fraud in our system?
You just brought it up. That's why. But what
Well,
I'm
that's what
saying
Trump
about the
did. That's what
military as well,
I'm giving you an
I'm
example of what
absolutely
something Trump did.
understood. I'm not, well, if we're talking about what Trump is doing, like I said, I'm not, I said that I wasn't against what he's done so far. Okay. But if we're talking separately about my position about the military and that budget, I think two things can be true at once. One, we should still maintain a huge budget and make sure that we are number one in the world in every way possibly when it comes to the military. However, I also would absolutely support an audit and try to make sure that everything is being spent efficiently, right? So, like, I think that you can have it both ways, and that's why I supported things like Doge, right? Like, a lot of people really didn't like it, but I don't see why it's a bad thing that we try to hold the government accountable with the money that we give them and that they borrow on that we are underwriting, right? Like we are, like we're basically signing off on all of these loans, even though they do it without actually having to ask us. So
Okay. So the idea that is then prevalent here is that you're okay with cutting cancer research before you look into it to see whether or not it's waste
I mean,
spending,
if that's
but
how
you're
you
not
want to
okay with.
twist,
But let me please finish. But you're not okay with cutting the military before you look in to see what specifically is going to be like waste spending or not. You said that we need to do the audit before we cut spending with the military, but we don't need to audit before we cut spending in terms of cancer research.
I didn't say that, but I'm
That's
not
what
the one
happened,
in
though.
the Oval Office, right? Exactly. But I'm not the one in the Oval Office making the decisions. And again,
So you disagree with it.
what cancer research like I said before, I think it's more nuanced, and I'm not saying that I doubt that we cut 100% of all funding to all cancer research, and that's what you're insinuating.
That's not what I'm insinuating. I'm saying
Yes, it
we've cut.
is.
Wait, by the way,
You
if I
said we
say that
cut
we've,
cancer research.
that doesn't mean we've cut all cancer research. Do you
Now it
understand the
doesn't,
distinction
but you're
based?
making that distinction.
Why? I think that distinction was already prevalent. Like I never said that we cut all of it. If I say we
Agree
cut
to
food
disagree.
stamps, if I say we cut food stamps, that doesn't mean that we cut all of food stamps. It means we've cut some of food stamps.
Well, understood. Okay, I gotcha. Like we just a misunderstanding. I think we get it
Sure.
now. So yeah, no, I think that I would not be necessarily unsupportive of cutting some cancer research if it was being spent inefficiently. But again, I don't have those details, so I can't really, say whether I agree or disagree. But of course, if that is the case, where it's something that was actually a positive, a net positive, of course I would disagree with it.
Then why don't you reallocate? Then why don't you reallocate into other cancer research? If we're not doing efficient cancer research in one way, we should probably still try to be researching it to ensure that we have a response.
Well, and
So
that's
we
what
should
I'm
probably
saying. Like
reinvest it into other cancer research rather than
that
specifically.
that's what I'm trying to say though, is that it doesn't even necessarily need to be reinvested, especially when we're in a horrible deficit, if we find out that a lot of the stuff that we were spending that money on was actually not doing anything or being inefficiently spent. Like I don't know why that's a bad thing. If we can get the same result while it's spending less money, why is that a bad thing? Like that just seems like a logical thing. So I don't know.
If you cared about the deficit, well then why'd you support Trump, who added 4 trillion more to the debt in his first administration, signed into law comparative to the Biden-Harris administration, and his campaign plans for this next administration will do 4 trillion more than Harris's campaign plans, according to the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, a nonpartisan committee from the federal government.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought all of that up. So again, I think it's like pretty nuanced, I think the first part is obviously, well, again, I can say right now, it's not like I am MAGA. I would vote for him. Well, I wouldn't say again because that would be illegal, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like I voted for him all three times, 29. So I can also say that I disagree with certain things, right? But I can also guarantee that at the time in his first presidency, the things that you are using as an excuse right now to try to knock him, I'm sure that you were supportive of, all of the COVID spending and all of the, support that we rendered during that entire time. I actually really never was. I just thought that we shouldn't have shut down the country, but that's like a huge reason why. Aside from that, sure, I will give it to you. I'm not a fan that Trump is not as much of a deficit hawk as I would like. Like, I wish that he were a little bit more. But do I think that the
Can I make one point real
reality,
quick?
really, really quickly, I'm done. Hold on. The reality is that I think even given all of those things and the concession that I just gave you, I still think that Harris would have been worse overall for the deficit, and we'll see.
That's just not true. Again, from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, they looked at
Yeah,
COVID and
but
non-COVID
okay,
related.
take it as the truth, but we aren't going to know until the term is up. Like we won't know, right? Like we didn't know that his spending was going to be so high in the first term, and we also didn't know that there was going to be a global pandemic to cause it. So like I'm just letting you know that in his first term as well, they said if he cut taxes, there was going to be an economic depression. Guess what? There absolutely was not until
What? Wait,
COVID.
who said there was going to be an economic depression from the taxes, the
Well,
tax
dude, I
cuts?
don't know how old you were in 2016, but they said it all the time on all the channels that you
No, they
didn't
didn't.
watch. Like literally, yes, they did. They did absolutely, and they were trying to say the same thing this time. And like that's what you're saying right now, because and sure, recession, depression,
Which media sources
economic
said this?
turmoil back in the day.
Yeah.
All of them, even Fox before they started to like Trump. Like it was. No, I'm serious. Again, you think that that's so funny, but when I was in college during the time, and they hated Trump too until he won the nomination, and then they just haven't, like stopped loving him ever since, because he kind of forced them, I guess. But they hated him too. They all did.
The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget looked at non-COVID and COVID-related spending, and even
Mm.
the non-COVID-related spending exceeded the entirety of the Biden-Harris administration's COVID and non-COVID-related spending. The non-COVID-related debt spending
What were the
signed into
figures?
I'll
Just
tell
out
you.
of curiosity.
Yeah, the non-COVID debt-related spending under the Trump administration was $4.8 trillion dollars signed into law.
Hmm.
For the Biden-Harris administration, the entirety of the debt-related spending, COVID and non-COVID related, combined was 4.3 trillion. So 500 billion less, right? And it's counting COVID and non-COVID. If you just look at non-COVID related spending for the Biden-Harris
Yeah.
administration, I think it's 2.1 trillion
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I
or
when you
2.2
did
trillion.
you I guess one question and then I also have a response, but my question would be you said specifically for Biden and Harris, which I'm not saying that you aren't being honest, but you specifically said debt spending or non-debt spending or something like that. Is that the same for the Trump administration? Like, is it the same number? Just out of curiosity. And then if it is, I have a response. And if it's not, I'd like to know,
The non-COVID
the
related spending is 4.8 trillion for the Trump administration, and it's 3.6 for non-COVID related spending.
three
I
point,
mean,
right.
for
But
COVID
that,
related spending. Sorry.
yep, got it. My question was, is are those total budgets? Is all of the money spent tracked the same way? Like, is it the same for Biden? Same for okay? Then that's fine. What I would say is, in response, again, I already told you that my one big complaint with Trump has always been that he's not enough of a deficit hawk, and we can even look into like the past. Like he thinks that debt is not a bad thing. Um, and secondly, I would say that you are leaving out the fact that the Biden Harris administration understood that they were inheriting COVID. The Trump administration had no idea that there was a global pandemic in the future, right? And so I think it's a lot easier to plan knowing what's already going on than otherwise, right? Like I don't know. Like does that not make sense?
No, try one more time, maybe.
What I'm saying is that the Trump administration had no idea that COVID was coming, and so they didn't plan for that. The
Yeah.
Biden Harris administration already were inheriting an existing global pandemic, right? So in that sense, that means that they were able to budget for that already existing, where the Trump administration wasn't. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think both sides were able to budget. There were both budget reconciliations that we could point to under their administrations.
And
They
like the
both had the
point
ability to, and
I would
also
like
that's
to,
Congress
sorry, go
that
on.
makes that type of determination, and they sign into law. But it's still based
Right.
upon what they sign into law. And also, even if you take into account the non-COVID related spending, it still is significantly worse on behalf of Trump. And even if you take into account nothing related to COVID at all, if we look at the campaign plans for the next administration, this administration right now, Harris versus Trump, it's 4 trillion more for Trump comparative to Harris in terms of debt related spending added into the law.
Um, if we're looking into I already told you that I just don't think that it's really fair to be looking into the future based on things we don't know yet. Like, at least for like budgets and things like that.
Then
What I
let's
would
look at
say
the
again is,
past. Then you said it wasn't fair for us to look at the past. So
and
at what point is it fair
that's
for
what
us
I
to
was
look
about
at?
to say. I'm about to address the past exactly. What I would say is, unfortunately, and I would agree with you, but I don't really think this is like it's a weird point for you to make, like about the spending. Like I think that you're used to trying to get people to say that they just don't like that they love Trump blindly and that they can't hold him accountable for things that they disagree with. I'm saying that I think that he spent too much. But if you're looking at it, it's like both administrations spent a little bit over $1 trillion a year, notwithstanding the COVID spending, and that's too much. Like, do you see what, like, as a deficit? That's too much.
Well, the
So
deficit
like,
was going down under the Obama administration. It was sub 400 million or 400
it,
billion under the Obama administration, and then Trump increased it.
yeah, no, I understand. I think
It was trending down, and then Trump increased it. If you want to look at
so.
the
Does
Biden Harris
that
administration, they inherited it. It was already increasing because of Trump,
so
and
does
they
that
signed
mean
into
that
law
you
less.
are so are you supportive of a balanced budget?
Yes, I actually am.
Yeah, me too. And so I would agree with you that that's a big hang up that I have with the Trump administration, but that cutting costs isn't, I don't think that it would have gotten any better under the Biden Harris administration, right? And I think that, again, long term, things like Doge are going to be a net positive because the spending will be less because we're not dumping money into agencies. Like I said, a big issue earlier that we discussed was the agency thing. I have very big issues with the agency stuff. Okay, I think that they have far too much power, but that's the way that it was designed by the people that we're talking about right now, right? And the issue is that I genuinely believe that it would be less even Harris the issue, although she would sign whatever the hell they put in front of her because she was just a freaking, patsy. But she
What does that mean?
she just they would have she would have she has no she I felt like she had absolutely no convictions, right? Like that was
What?
the what do you
No,
mean?
she
Like,
she does she did have convictions. Like I mean, we can point to them. We can give the specific policy positions she held to. If you're saying she doesn't
can
have
we
convictions because she said something and then later changed her mind, well, Trump has said things and then later specifically not followed through with them, like releasing the Epstein files. Like,
hmm
I
yeah,
mean, we could point to
well,
him
if
being
you
a
want to
serial
talk, but
adulterer,
okay,
30,000
this
confirmed
this
lies under his first administration.
this is like this would be, I guess, a little bit more of a fun conversation. Like the if you want to say that Harris didn't have huge fundamental changes from when she was running for every other position she's ever had, and then when she was, basically just selected for the presidential campaign, to for you to say that she didn't have huge policy changes and huge changes in the rhetoric that she said before and after that, that is just intellectually dishonest. You know that there were huge changes.
I don't know if I would say they're huge. I mean, what are the huge policy changes?
Well, I mean, on social issues, she completely changed her tune.
Such
On
as?
She became a lot more moderate, like views that she had previously had. Again, I don't want to misquote, right? But we know this. Like, I'm not looking at these things. I'm
Like?
not in front of my computer, right? So I can't pull up exactly what the quotes are. But again, I would love it if you did, and we can discuss them, right? But I don't want to be in a gotcha moment by
I'm
misquoting
I'm confused. Why would I be providing a quote for the claim that you are making? Why that makes
No,
no
I'm
sense to me at
saying,
all. Like, why would you assume that I should be the one to bring it up, and then you can pick from the ones? Which shouldn't you, if you're making the point, be able to mention
no.
specific examples?
Well, no, because the conversation took us this way. And why I say that you should be the one is because you are the one in front of a computer and you don't have to listen to what I select. You may select it and then we can discuss.
Well, I know exactly kind of what you'd be referencing, but I don't think that's a huge change. Like, her position on control isn't a huge change.
I think it absolutely is. And,
What was the
that's just one
change?
thing.
What was their change in policy?
Well, I mean, again, I guess there was never a substantive change in policy because she lost,
So
right?
if there
But no,
was
no, no.
never a substantive
That's not
change
a
in
gotcha.
policy, then
It's
what are you
that
disagreeing with?
she wasn't able to implement any policy change.
If you want to talk about things that were passed, there was the most tie-breaking votes ever in the history of vice presidents under the Harris administration or under the Biden Harris administration. So the idea that she didn't have any policies passed is ridiculous. What did she pass
I
when
didn't
she
say
was
that
in
she didn't have any
office that was
policies
so
passed. I
distinct from
said,
what she was advocating for?
um, I don't know off the top of my head. Like, and I'm not
People
going
brought
to
up
say so.
fracking, but in the Inflation
Oh
Reduction
yeah,
Act,
that's a great example. I would love. That's a great example.
well,
Like
watch
to think
this.
that she was ever
Can
pro
I dispute
fracking
that?
before Pennsylvania was on the line is just
Can I
like to be
dispute this?
intellectually dishonest. Yeah,
So can I?
sure.
Yeah. So she was willing to compromise on it. She's not saying that she supports it, but she's willing to compromise on it in order to get better legislation. The Inflation Reduction Act, for example, which she was the tie-breaking vote on, had fracking leases within it, meaning
You
that she
don't
was
think
willing to
that
compromise on it
her
in order to get the largest investment in renewable energy in this country's history ever.
you there are literally videos of her saying that she wants to ban fracking.
Yes, I
You
know.
can't make it up, right. And then there are videos of her saying that she supports fracking, right? And what
No,
I'm
you're not
trying to
understanding. You're
say,
not understanding compromise. What do you know what compromise means?
well, she didn't say, well, Parker, I do understand what compromise means. And what I'm telling you is that she didn't say, hey, you know what I need to do? I need to compromise, and I'm going to let the
That's
American
exactly what
people
she
know
said.
that. No, she didn't. She didn't say, I'm going to let everybody know that this is what I need to do. And it goes against what I believe. No, she said, no, I've always been for fracking. And you know it. Look,
That's not what she said.
I think
She
it's a
said she was willing to
weird,
compromise on it, and that's
I
exactly what she
think
did with the
it's,
Inflation
I,
Reduction Act because she signed it into law.
the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah.
Well, she got it signed into law because she was the tie-breaking vote.
No, I understand. Yeah, I uh, I don't know. I just sort of disagree. I think that that was a big problem that a lot of people had, and I think that that's a big
Yeah.
reason why she lost. You
But
know,
that's not
so
a huge policy change. There are
yeah,
way bigger
yes, it is.
changes in terms of Trump. Trump used to be
You think
pro-choice.
Trump is the most pro-choice Republican president we've ever had? I think that that is abundantly clear. Like I think that that's so clear.
Well, okay. But is he pro-choice right now?
No. But what I'm saying is that and also just for the record, I am
No.
pro-choice, right? So
Okay.
like I'm more of a
But
libertarian.
that's a
So like
huge
again,
change
I'm
in
not
views,
gonna.
right? Going from being
Uh,
pro-choice to being pro-life is a big change in views, right?
well, I would say so, but that change was made before he ever became a serious political candidate, right?
Uh,
Like he started running as a Republican and had that view made up. And what I'm telling you is that
he
if you
ran in
want to
2000.
believe, he did
He just
not really
wasn't a
run.
serious candidate. So
He
you're
did not
faulting
really
Kamala
run.
Harris for being a
He did
serious
not.
candidate?
He
I
did
thought she
not
wasn't a
really.
serious candidate to a bunch of Trump supporters.
He wasn't a serious candidate to actually the entire country for more or
Oh,
less. Like
okay.
it
If she
seemed that
wasn't a
way.
serious candidate, then your point specifically about her was invalid.
How so?
You just said the only reason it was valid was because she was a serious candidate and he wasn't. Because, again, he wasn't a serious candidate until 2016. You said he changed his mind such in a big
We're
way,
using
right? From
these
being pro-choice
captions
to
are
being
so
pro-life when
funny.
he wasn't a
These
serious
captions are
candidate.
so
So
funny
Kamala
to
Harris
me.
did the
Like
same thing when she wasn't a serious candidate under your own perspective. Therefore, it is the case that
it's not
you
under
wouldn't
my
say that
own
it's such a
perspective.
huge change in her perspectives, right?
Okay. I think again, it's like these gotcha moments. I don't know. I think that I applaud you for being able to get a lot of people, but we're using two definitions of serious here, and I think that you're a smart guy and obviously understand
Okay,
that. When I
then
say that,
clarify.
yeah, I would love to. What I'm saying is that we all know that Donald Trump was an unserious presidential candidate in 2001 because the campaign was actually never seriously pursued. Boom, there you go. And it wasn't for the Republicans, it wasn't for the Democrats, it was for some third party. Okay. In when we're talking about Kamala Harris, whether I think that she was a serious candidate, what I'm saying is that she never went through the primary process. There was never really a democratic
She
process
did.
for her to. No, she didn't. She went to the DNC, and then they basically just said, "Okay, this is what the leadership said that we need to do, so we're going to do it." Okay, so
You're going to
that's
hate me
not
for
really
this.
that
She was
democratic.
voted in. You're going to hate me for this. Watch.
For
You
the
know, when we,
delegate from the delegates or what?
by the voters. You don't want me to tell you why?
Hmm.
Because when we voted in the primaries, we voted for the Biden-Harris ticket, meaning if Biden
Sure.
stepped down, that Harris would step up. That's the reality,
Oh
is
yeah,
that we
but
did
it's
vote
not
for her. And then 80% of the Democratic Party was satisfied with her being the nominee, right?
right.
So, like, there
So
was
you know what
vast
they should
support in the
have
Democratic
done?
Party for her to be the nominee. So
I
we did
think that
vote
it
for her.
is so wild that you are trying to say that. I think that if that were the case, then they should have actually gotten Biden out of office and they could have gotten her to be the president. And then it would have actually made sense what you're saying. But they did not
No,
vote
but
for
then
her.
you
They
guys would
did.
be like, she's unelected because she was just brought up as vice president. No, so like in the way that she specifically did it, it was completely fine, and that's actually completely set up because the ticket is technically a bit separate than what existed in the context of the presidency at that current moment. It could have been the case that there could have been a different vice president, but there wasn't. It was
Right.
Harris. So when we voted for Biden Harris, it is the case that if Biden steps down from that ticket, Harris steps up on that ticket, regardless of whether or not Biden steps down as president. So we did
Okay.
vote for
Can you
her,
show
and
me?
I do think the narrative
Show the law
surrounding
about
this is
that
like
because that
ridiculous.
doesn't exist. No, it
What,
doesn't.
say that
That
again?
law doesn't. That law does not exist. It does not exist. Okay.
What
What
law?
they
For
they
vice presidents
chose
to become presidents?
no for them to automatically be elevated when the sitting president never actually steps down.
But
He
it's
didn't.
on
He
the
just decided
ticket.
not to.
Wait, wait.
He
I'm sorry.
just
That's just how
decided not to
vice.
seek
It's in the
re-election.
Constitution. That's how vice presidents work.
Uh, what exactly are you saying
It's
is how
technically
vice
party
presidents?
policy. It's technically party policy that's in line with how the Constitution runs.
Right. Okay. So how so? I'd like to know the specific language of the Constitution so we can discuss that because,
Are
and
you
I'm
really
happy to look it
disputing that
up.
there's specific language of the Constitution that indicates that vice presidents step up when presidents step down?
Right. Yeah. But I would like to see the specific language that says when they just decide not to seek re-election because that's what happened. He didn't step down.
Wait, that's
And I
party
think,
policy. That's party policy in line with how we run vice president and president structure in the
so,
Constitution.
and you think that it's totally okay that they decided to have him step down, so late into the
He decided
process,
himself. Yeah, I called for that. I called for him to step down
right after the debate, right? Or beforehand?
before and after, but mostly
Well, I
after.
mean,
Like it was more widespread after. So obviously, I
good
had the
for
ability to be
good
able
for
to convince
you.
more people of it.
Good for you. And unlike you, I won't hold you to the decisions of the administration, of the prior administration. But what I'm trying to say is that they did that by design. And how you can just think that is still democratic is not, it's just not intellectually honest. Like,
I think it's incredibly intellectually honest. I think it makes sense based upon our current democratic processes in terms of how the Constitution works with what would happen with a president. I think that's the best set of precedents that we should follow. Any other type of precedents, I think, would be really weird in that connotation. If we want to talk about the
voting?
context, if we want to talk about the context of our democracy and caring about our democracy, I mean, how the hell are we going to vote for a guy who incited a violent insurrection at the Capitol to try to overturn the 2020 election? Right? While also simultaneously saying that you're against Kamala Harris because it wasn't quote unquote democratic. What?